everyone to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle brought by Still and Moving Center in Honolulu, Hawaii. And this is a place where we really look to give everyone a chance to find some of their own deep wisdom and to share it with the rest of us. And that follows a presenter at the beginning, giving us something inspirational that we can kind of springboard off of, shall we say. So our theme for this week seems to fit very well with the quote that we just read about affecting the atmosphere in which we live and which morally we can do, and to affect the quality of the day. And certainly this idea of the language of the soul makes a huge difference to the quality of our day and the moral standpoint from which we live. We're so fortunate to have with us someone who has spent a lifetime in studying the philosophy of Theosophy. She's actually been at the New York United Lodge of Theosophists, I think for half a century now, if I understand that correctly. And there's an article, a couple paragraphs of which I believe were sent to you from Robert Crosby, an American theosophist who was writing at the beginning of the 1900s. And so having Helena speak to us from the Theosophical tradition on this particular topic is particularly apt, and we feel so pleased to have you. Thank you, Helena.
Welcome, everybody. And Robert Crosby, an American theosophist. We were summarizing an article, actually, put this together. And the soul, for me, as I was doing these PowerPoints, I was looking at the fall colors, which are so beautiful. And the theme, you'll see, has a lot to do with the fall. And the leaves are like little souls, where they contain the souls of life. But the seeds are everywhere. So the language of the soul, of course, now we're looking at another plane. And the question is, where is the real man? Where is the real man? The soul is pictured in the ancient teachings as the real self, man. From the Christian teachings, we are led to believe that man has a soul and may save it or lose it. The idea generally held in the West. But the conception of the ancients and that of Theosophy, which is a representation of this eternal idea, is a little bit different. Soul is, in fact, the one who perceives. It is vision itself, pure and simple, unmodified, and not subject to change. It looks directly on ideas. We teach this to the kids in Theosophy school too. We don't have souls. We are souls. That's who we really are. The real man, whether asleep or awake, whether in a physical body during his lifetime, or whether in another form of body after death or birth, before birth, before the existence of this planet or this solar system, this real man was the same perceiver, then as now, the same soul all the time, the creator of all the conditions that have arisen. Man is the intelligent creator of this universe in connection with all the beings below him and all the beings above him. Man thus forms part of one great brotherhood, and this bond of brotherhood extends throughout, from the lowest being to the very highest. All are souls. Even the very lowest forms of matter are nonetheless souls, For in the lowest form of matter is the power to perceive, the power to act, the power to gain experience. The potentiality is the same in all. And that potentiality becomes a potency, ever expanding as the soul increases its range of experiences. All the forms, the bodies that compose the universe are the results of the experience and action of the souls inhabiting them. They are all the instruments of the soul, and we always act with others in any grade or class of beings. There is that unity of action which produces a similarity of instrument. In these similarities of instrument, we play upon and are played upon by beings of the same class in the fullest degree, and by lower and higher classes in a greater or less degree. The self is the same in each being, no matter how great that being may be, nor how low. We get another idea in regard to the soul, that soul also represents the acquired experience gained through evolution by each and every class of being. Crosby tells us that soul also represents the acquired experience gained through evolution by each and every class of being. Each individual being is not only self, with a capital S, but in addition, the acquired experience gained through contact with all other beings. Realizing that there are individual souls, we can see that the only differences between souls are in their degrees of acquired experience. Taking the soul from this point of view, then, as the acquired experience of individuals, when we speak of God, or the oversoul, the universal oversoul, we simply mean the acquired experiences or wisdom of every soul and all souls. The self is wisdom itself. That would be the meaning of the sentence in the Bhagavad Gita, that the self is wisdom itself, the object of wisdom, and that which is to be attained by wisdom. Full consciousness of the union of all souls, our spiritual identity. Supposing there is a real language of the soul, what would it be capable of expressing? Undoubtedly, every experience through which it had ever been. Theosophy teaches the doctrine of reincarnation, of successive lives, both on this earth and in other states of substance and consciousness. Continuity of consciousness, or spirit, is preserved through all these states and environments, and the record of all that occurred in all these lives is present at all times in any one life, in manifestation because the self, the spirit, is present. In those past lives, we have undoubtedly spoken different languages from those we now speak. In those personal existences, we used languages now altogether deserted and forgotten by us as persons. But the memory of those languages must be there if we are a continuing self and preserve the continuity of experience gained, as well as the continuity of consciousness. Where is that recorded? It is impacted in the imperishable part of man's nature. It cannot be spoken, any spoken tongue, whatever. Theosophy points out that matter is in 7 states or degrees of substances, and each of these with 7 substates, the whole ranging from the very finest, most plastic and enduring state down to the very coarsest. What we may call the material plane or matter, as it is known and suspected by us, with its many differing gradations and combinations. Man, as the highest and most evolved being concerned in the evolution of the solar system, is clothed in all these 7 states of substance, derived from the original primordial substance, the homogeneous matter from which every form is evolved. These degrees of substance are indicated in the 7 colors of the spectrum. They are also pointed to in the 7 notes of the scale of music. The notes and colors are not exactly what we think they are. They represent the 7 great distinct states of matter. Sound itself, or light itself, represents the homogeneous, and the 7 prismatic colors are derived. Our colors and our musical notes are only replicas of these. They're reflections or correspondences in this one state of matter and sound with which we are acquainted. We know there are 7 colors. We know that there are other octaves of color beyond those, which our eyes are unable to transmit to us, some so high, some so low, that our eyes will not register their vibrations. The same is true with sound. We are able to detect several, but there are degrees of sound beyond the highest we are able to detect, and also sounds too low for us to hear. This is why it was said in old times, as mentioned in the Bible, that the wise understood every man speaking in his own tongue, although many different languages were used than is now. It was because these wise men could read back of the spoken language that they knew the very thoughts, feelings, and natures of the speakers. All this we shall find out if we move along the path shown, for it is not an uncharted path. Remember, others have been along that path before us. They are our elder brothers, Jesus, for example, Buddha for another, and all those who came at different times as saviors to the many different peoples. That is why in any person's notion, even so simple an action as moving from one chair to another, the quality of the thought, the very nature of the person is clearly shown by the assemblage of colors and shades of colors produced by the action. The same with any uttered sounds or speech, no matter what. The centers in the body are set in motion, each having its own particular telltale colors and rates of vibration. The brain. In our thoughts, we have a great combination of colors and sounds, constantly changing their form or appearance. Our brain is the finest material instrument we use. It, like everything else we use, is an evolution. It is the organ of thought on this plane of substance where we are now acting. If we think high and noble thoughts, then our brains become very susceptible to that kind of use. Every kind of thought has its own particular rate and range of vibration, its own particular colors. If our brains are trained to high thoughts while we are awake, if we try to understand what we really are while occupying this physical instrument, what this body of ours represents, what it is capable of, then gradually the brain will begin to respond to something of our higher knowledge. It will carry forward and transmit more and more of the language of the soul, of all the garnered experience of the past. But most of our mental activity is applied solely to the things of this life, to things of the body. So mankind is continually moving along a false path. No being, however high, can prevent this because each man is soul, is spirit, is consciousness, is of the highest, however he use and apply his powers. Theosophy endeavors to present to man what his real nature is, that he is, first, last, and all the time, spirit. Spirit means life and consciousness, the power to see, to know, to experience. We all have that. It is not an uncharted path. Remember, others have been along that path before us. They are our elder brothers, Jesus, for example, Buddha for another, and all those who came at different times as saviors to the many different peoples. They had all acquired the language of the soul. The language of the soul can be acquired only when the being realizes that his duty is not to himself, but to the highest interests of his fellow men, not to save his own soul, but to lead as many of his neighbors as he possibly can in the direction of the truth, desiring nothing for himself. We keep the doors closed of our own will in ignorance, yes, but who remains ignorant? Those only who will not hear, those only who doubt the language of the soul.
You know, there were a lot of beautiful thoughts within those gorgeous pictures that you gave to us. Thank you so much. Helena has packed so much life learning into a very compact package for us. I just really want to thank you so much for that, and done it so beautifully. Go ahead, Cliff.
Cliff?
Well, thank you very much, Helena, for that presentation. It was quite inspiring. At the beginning, you talked about, you kind of defined the soul as that power of perception, that we're all perceivers from a very, very deep level. I've noticed in the context of little children, and also when Renee and I have traveled to other cultures like in India or Costa Rica or something, children love to, as well as in other cultures, they love to look you straight in the eye. Whereas often in our own culture, we seem to kind of avoid that deep eye contact. And I was wondering if you could make some connection between that level of communication, which would be the language of the soul between individuals, and perception.
Well, the eyes especially are really powerful. You know, when you think about it, they connect. They're like the biggest nerves in our body, right? You know, picking up light, and also capable of giving out light. In terms of healing, you know, there's a frequency, you know, from our hands, from our eyes. They say the eyes are the windows of the soul. Half of the brain is involved in eyesight. That's a massive amount of commitment, you know, to the cortex, the human cortex, the limbic brain underneath it. I mean, I work with the brain, you know, our cortex that distinguishes us as human beings is 7 cells thick, you know, and all the rest of the brain, the limbic brain, you know, has evolved, you know, through all the different conditions. And, you know, we're carrying those experiences with us. But it's also a gateway and a bridge, And children have, of course, on incarnation. We say in Theosophy, by the time they reach about the age of 7, they're pretty much set into this incarnation as souls. And then we have to get through the teenage years somehow or another too. And all those experiences, you know, mostly hormonal adjustments. And then finally, maybe we'll get a span of a good 25 years, right? You know, they have good brain function, or more or better if we take care of ourselves. But you know, the eye contact. There's a study Rupert Sheldrake did with students at Cambridge, where he studied people's ability to detect, the students' ability to detect when they were being watched. And we're actually we pick up quite quickly, you know, when somebody is looking at us. And we're drawn to them almost instantaneously, energetically, you know. So we pick up on that magnetic thread of fluid, you know, that plastic fluid, you know. It spoke about that in the reading too, you know, that finer substance, soul and spirit, you know, conducts on the visible and invisible planes. The visible planes are more obvious to it, and some people some cultures, absolutely, it's considered to be very rude, to make direct eye contact. So there are cultural, cognitive barriers. There's certainly a mindfulness, about how we use our eyes that speaks to us. So it's with children, if they're healthy, if they avert their eyes, right, we know that there's something wrong on some level, and we might go fishing to find out, where the roadblocks may come from. But trauma causes us to dissociate a bit, to lose eye contact, or a fever, childhood fever, etc. But also the types of interactions that people have with each other, their relationships, the parental. What's amazing is in the epigenetic research that past traumas, right? Because we're the sum total of all our experiences. Past trauma in our families, down to now the 14th generation before us, can be transmitted. So when we've done all this work in ourselves and we're doing okay, and then all of a sudden we get blindsided by an illness or a behavior or a mannerism, and we wonder, where did that come from? And what are we going to do about it? The old karma coming up through us to be healed? Are we going to responsibly rise to the occasion and try to make a deposit that lessens the load for the family and for the collective? Or how do we respond to it? And we have
interesting kind of
Yes,
questions
please.
about this. I'm wondering what other people might think about this ability to communicate with one another. We usually, especially if we speak the same language, according to what we normally understand as language, that's our common currency of communication. And Cliff is mentioning, and Helena's kind of following through on that communication that sometimes comes through the eyes. And I wonder, what are other people's experience? Do you feel as if you've had a kind of soul communication sometimes through something other than the word? Yeah, Kevin.
So I think for myself, I am a little bit the opposite. If I'm silent, you know that there's something wrong, because usually I'm very outgoing and talking. So I'm not one to like yell or lose my temper or something like that. I just really get silent. And that means, a lot of people are like, well, what's wrong? And I say, well, it's one of two things. Either it's not worth my energy, that I'm so angry I don't want to speak about it, or I'm really reserving myself so that I don't say something that I'll regret. So I think silence has a big power too in communication, because if you really know somebody and they are never silent, it's a good, it's kind of like a secondary body language to say something's really affecting this person, or, you've done something that maybe is not good. So I think in addition to those other forms of body language, silence too can be a very potent, expression.
Mm-hmm. Erika, are you going to add something in?
Sure. Well, thank you, Helena. It was so wonderful story today. I was drawn to let to come to this gem today somehow, and then it's kind of makes sense. Like it's made my understanding clearer, and then it's like open up like aha moment. Yeah, this is it. So I'm very grateful to be able to listen to your talk today. And I was thinking that you said like we are soul, and soul is like acquired experience. That's really kind of makes sense to me. That's why like I speak Japanese and English, and sometimes in Japanese own language, sometimes just I feel the word cannot like convey what you really mean to, like in English too. And sometimes people understand what I tried to say, like who I am, like really quickly with that word, but sometimes not. It's both in English, like same way. So it's like you can connect like some people better than other without languages. And then that's, I feel, just a acquired experience. Like if you're like same, I don't know, I don't want to make it like a level, but if you have a similar experience, like you understand better, and then those kind of stuff. So now today I kind of feel really clear. It just does, we are different because of all of us acquired experience of difference. And then totally from just up to now, a lot of like learning, like I'm very interested in like spiritual learning and stuff. Just that I feel like we are here to experience and nothing more than that. And that makes us, our soul, grow and better. So yeah, just thank you for your talk today.
I was wondering if the language of the soul, and I think this is, ties on to what Eriko was just saying about us being here for the purpose of acquiring experience. And so I was wondering, that experience has significance. It has meaning. When we take it in, we work with it, we process all these experiences, and then we go out again and we we try to do something based on what we learned from those experiences. So they then have meaning and significance. And I was wondering if we could say that when we're speaking at a level with one another, when we're communicating at a level with one another, that has to do with meaning, that has to do with significance, that has to do even maybe with symbology. Like, I wonder what this symbolizes. I wonder what this stands for. This happened in my life. What does that mean? So when we're speaking on that kind of plane of what does it mean, is that an indicator that we're speaking the language of the soul, whether it's through our eyes or through our mouth or some other body language way of communicating with one another? Does the language of the soul have to do with meaning and significance?
I think what amazes me about the process is that the evolutionary process has an intelligence. It's not random. That there is a series of progressive awakenings. That is our that we potentiate, but it's actually a profound. It can be profoundly uplifting. It could also go in the other direction. But if we look at the bigger picture, as awful as things might seem, when we take a step back and we get some perspective, we can read the larger meaning and the larger lessons that are intended from these experiences.
I love these beautiful candles that somebody has lit, by the way. It's just seems like another way of communicating. Maybe, to me, candles symbolize things like heart light and hope in the midst of darkness. So just having a symbol like that showing, it feels like an expression of soul, somehow a communication of soul. So I guess that's Carol Ann. Thank you so much for having that up. Robert? This is
Thank
Robert
you.
Moore in Santa Barbara.
The language of the soul is independent of any particular human language. There's verbal, there's nonverbal, there's gesture, there's looks, all of these other aspects of communication. But what I was curious about, what people thought, if the soul is the perceiver and the difference between any soul is the accumulated experience, then potentially we should be able to communicate with the plants, right? And rocks. And many people actually have that experience, don't they? I mean, they seem to be able to, it's not going to be language, right? But it will be some type of meaningful communication between you and a tree or you and a plant.
In my experience, people in Hawaii have more frequent experiences on along those lines than some of the other folks that I know.
I don't have I like to acquire those ability, and then I try to talk to birds, particularly lately. But I think sometimes message come. It's not like talking, but I take it message from like animals or bird or plants, and I think it's just that I think all of us have ability, but it's just like a buried, hidden, and then I try to wake them up, but it's just I don't know. What do you think, Helena?
No, I mean, in the teachings of Theosophy, we're told that man can actually influence the weather. And it's a skill that some people can acquire, their relationships to animals, to plants, a lot of research done on plants that it can register. I mean, we bounce frequencies off each other all the time. Our heart field, gives out 500 times more electricity than our brain field. And, that body stretches, for some people, 16, 20 feet, and it's invisible. But, we bounce off karma coming towards us. We have a record, in the astral of experiences and in our astral being, and we perceive and we communicate. I was thinking about when you brought up communication, how we also communicate using space, and trying to find the right amount of space in a situation or with people is so important, especially when you're doing healing work, understanding the different frequencies, and you don't know, you can't assume that one frequency is one size fits all. There's so many factors that are involved. So the wisdom and the discernment, that's needed, it comes from our past experiences, but it's also, we're shaping it, we're co-creating, all the time, our future, and helping to mine, those fields of karma, those skandic, the baggage, that we have, the collective baggage, the family baggage, the cultural baggage, the schools, of thought that we engage in, all those things, we don't even realize it, but we do. We couldn't cross the street if we weren't using our intuition, so we develop habits and characteristics all the time, and we try to solidify, right, that communication, that ability to respond to situations and use not only our wisdom, but the collective wisdom of spirit to help us. We can, it's like a bank, and we can, of perception. So we can widen the field, depending on whether or not we are selfish and act for ourselves, or we can expand that karma by acting, we say, for and as the self of all creatures, taking it all in a bigger perspective has an effect on the karma and our access, to conscious communication, into healing, to making the road maybe just a little bit easier, for all of us, all our brothers and sisters, no matter what kingdom they're in, consciously.
Cliff and I just saw a really wonderful film. I'm hoping his memory is better than mine, about a woman in an island off of Italy, I think. What was that called, Cliff?
Gosh, I can't remember the island.
But it was a woman who had been the younger sister of a priest and had been serving him her whole life. And then when he died, then she suddenly found herself adrift. And really completely without any means whatsoever of sustaining herself in terms of money or a place to live or anything like that. And she managed to make her way through. And at many times in the film, we see her seeing a bird or a collection of birds. And depending on what they were doing or the timing of when they were doing it, all of a sudden she would like have this little brightening awareness, and then she would know what to do next. And I don't think it was saying, oh, the birds are smart creatures, and so we as human beings should be just listening to the birds. It wasn't like that. I think it's more like what Eriko and Helena are both suggesting, is that this greater collective wisdom, if we're tuned in, we can see it reflected in different places in nature and things that happen. And it's just a matter of, okay, do we have our antenna up? Are we being aware? And maybe for us, it's not a bird. Maybe it's the way that a leaf falls down, or it could be, I've noticed sometimes when I've had string bracelets pop off my wrist, it meant that something had broken, but not always bad. Sometimes it was a breakthrough. I mean, so it could be all kinds of little things. It's just, are we perceptive to the way the universe is speaking to us, how things are manifesting for us to understand and have more insight, perhaps. Jonathan, great to have you.
I was wondering about soul memories, and I think this ties in with your point, Renee. And both you and Helena have experience with involving children in theater, especially the enactment of ancient stories, like maybe from the Ramayana or something else, the Mahabharata, or other stories. I was wondering, did you feel like that had anything to do with the language of the soul and of kind of cultivating that receptivity that you were talking about, either one of you or both of you?
When I am choosing a particular story to have people enact, I look for stories that have really universal themes, that have characters, storylines that I think are going to speak across cultures, that someone shows a heroic quality, for example. Somebody shows that they're facing a real dilemma, and yet they use their ingenuity and to find their way out. Also, other people come and are of assistance. And so together they can face the challenge and overcome it. Those kinds of themes are something I think speak so widely across all cultures. They speak across different age levels, across circumstances. If somebody's very poor or if somebody's very rich, some of these very universal themes, which, for example, Joseph Campbell explored through all of his world mythology studies. And he came up with the hero's journey, for example. And I very much feel as if when we get to those real core themes, we are vibrating at that soul level, and we are able to communicate meaning. It has to do with meaning and significance through these very universal tales and enacting them.
I think also those tales, Joseph Campbell is a great example of that. The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I mean, it's this same tale, same journey. There are differences, for us along the journey, but especially for kids, the exposure to these stories, whether they're Native American or, whatever culture, the oral traditions, there is an acknowledgement that these ideas need to be refreshed, in the earlier parts of our incarnation. If we miss those windows, it could be tragic. And people, I think now with the kids, I worry about the kids and reaching out to them. I take them on these, I call them spiritual adventures, and it's like the stories. We're bouncing up against this diaphragm, if you will, of energy, of karma. And it reverberates. And there's a way to walk through the woods, right? And if people don't have an understanding of how life bounces off of us and our responses and our reactions, et cetera, can have consequences. People need challenges to grow, so you need to stretch a little bit, but you don't have to suffer. There will be suffering, but and we could do things about that. But there's also a need to refresh those strategies so that we're not overcome. People get stuck, they get blocked, for a gazillion different reasons. And so there's plenty of suffering around. But there's also the possibility for realizing this divine potential, that we have, and that's the story, of the hero with 1,000 faces. It's the same story, repeating itself about this amazing process, and how can we share that with the children so that when they do hit the challenges, the real serious challenges in life, they can bring out their best self, to work their way through them. We're all like scouts, and scout leaders, passing on, this information and sharing it. It's really a divine treasure hunt, and also our inheritance is much bigger than we realize at times. It's a real gift.
I love what you said about enactments like this can help ourselves and children to recognize the hero within ourselves. so huge when it comes to us facing these different roadblocks and challenges and traumas, that knowing that really, if we're part of one self, one soul, if within we're truly divine, we have so much potential. That's a great reminder, Helena. I'd love it if in the last couple minutes that we have, maybe everybody would be willing to just give a quick little takeaway, something that struck you today that you'll be able to carry forward, some little note, word, color, linguistically, that you can bring with you. You could put it in the chat if for some reason that feels more comfortable. All kinds of different ways of communicating.
I think what we can learn is the language of the soul, which I would associate with intuition, is not a verbal language. It's intelligent and it instructs, but it's and it works through, I think, different agencies of the body, not just the brain or the mind. So that's why we kind of walk around half educated. We don't have a full perception or a full understanding of some insight that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, we are visited, you might say, that the lower mind, the lower self, is visited by intuitions and by awakenings. And that kind of, that's important. So you have to be grateful for what you do experience and what you do learn. Because it's maybe, even if it's just a third of what you could really understand about something, if you were more developed.
I think I was especially touched when in several of the scenarios that she gave us, that we learn from those who do not know, or those who do know, those who have little, or those who have much. And I think that's our lost in experiences, or our chance to pass through that path of someone, because sometimes we think we only need to be with people who think like us or alike or more of our thinking, and yet we had a lot to learn from others who have either not very little of it or quite opposite from us. I'm Asian, and so I know that Asians do not like to do eye contact, but I became very friendly with these girls from Brazil. And they told me, Sharon, you have to give eye contact to show your sincerity. So I started to do that, and because with them, and when you do eye contact with other Asians, they don't like it and they feel very uncomfortable. But this is all a learning process of people that feel like you do or not. And how can we learn from each one of them, and how do we grow from all of that? And I believe we lose our chances when we don't understand or see that as something that's a big possibility for us.
I just said, because my silence is more dangerous than my words, my silence can destroy much more than my words ever will. So I just wanted to say, from a fellow New Yorker, it was really great to welcome you. I think you had some really amazing perspectives, and obviously intrigued everybody to really give some very nice conversation. And I thank you for taking a part out of your night to spend with us. It was really great having you.
Helena, thank you so much. It was
Thank you, Renee, for making it possible. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Wonderful meeting you all. Thank you.